For 27 years, Greg has pastored churches across Kentucky, and as a Hebrew and Old Testament scholar, he has taught at Southern. He taught for 6 years at Georgetown College. But probably his boldest move, some might call it crazy, was to become the president of a brand new seminary. Now, think about that for just a moment. A group of people get together and say, let's start a new seminary. And Greg's going, yeah, sign me up. That's bold, especially in this day and age with the challenges that Molly was describing for us. It takes a special kind of person to take on the responsibility for getting a new institution off the ground. And as the first president of BSK, Dr. Earwood was often described as, quote, having the seminary in the trunk of his car, end quote. And that's because, as I understand, all the paperwork and documents that were part of the proceedings to put the school together were in your trunk. So we're glad you didn't have an accident. Yes. Greg had a vision for a school that was different. A school that loved and supported the local church. One that honored scholarship and gave attention to community and to spiritual formation. He was working to build a seminary that would form exceptional ministers in Kentucky. And across the first 5 years of BSK, the school really had very few staff and faculty. And so Greg had to wear many hats, including the hat of recruiter. And my understanding is that all the students in the first 5 years were personally recruited by Greg. He also, of course, was the dean and the president and probably chief cook and bottle washer, too. He was a caring, relational president. I don't know I guess we'll just find out. How many of you have been to lunch with Greg Earwood? Yeah. So word has it that during Greg's time as president, he went to lunch with every single student at BSK. And made a point of doing so, and multiple times with some, because Greg wanted to get to know these people. He wanted to hear them, and he wanted to be part of their lives as a person and as a caregiver. Dr. Earwood was key in the development of the Pastoral Care program at BSK, really our strongest program. Until the addition of our rural ministry concentration that just started this fall, the Pastoral Care concentration was our only specialized track in our MDiv program. Led by Dr. Wayne Oates, Greg's dream of forming exceptional chaplains and counselors has since touched so many lives. And even though he hasn't pastored, I think, in over 20 years, Greg continues today to be asked to do funerals and weddings and fill pulpits at congregations where he pastored years ago. That's the depth of relationships that Greg fostered. That's the level of respect that people have for Greg and his approach to ministry. Last year, BSK's Board of Trustees named Dr. Earwood the President Emeritus, and we are blessed by his continued presence on campus. In fact, each week now I get to hear the sounds of Hebrew coming from the classroom next to my office as Greg teaches the course this semester. Greg's care continues. I'll give you just one example. There is a church in Kentucky called Canmer Baptist Church that some of you, I can see nods, know where it is. It's a very small congregation, rural congregation, in a little town not too far from Bowling Green. And Greg has cared for this congregation across the years. He's driven, it's not next door to Georgetown. He's driven 4 hours to get there and to be with them on many Sundays as a preacher, so filling their pulpit and being with them. And he's grown to know and love the people in the congregation. And through that, the congregation has also captured and been inspired by Greg's vision for theological education. So much so that this little bitty congregation now, we have a trustee from there who serves also as our finance chair. We have donors from that church. But most importantly, this little church has been one of the most common sites for our students to get experience preaching. They invite our students, some of you here, preach or have preached at Canmer Baptist Church. Why would a president spend time at a little bitty rural congregation? I think it's because we see Greg's character and his values in those actions, in that these people he sees, and they're special to him. I know that Canmer Baptist Church is glad, Greg, that you have made time for them in your life. And I know there are other churches on that list as well. The fruits of your care are evident there and in the lives that they touch. I want to read one quote, and then, Greg, we'll let you come and speak. But I noticed this week, and it stuck with me. It's a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that great German theologian and martyr. And he said, "The world is overcome not through destruction, but through reconciliation. Not ideals, nor programs, nor conscience, nor duty, nor responsibility, nor virtue, but only God's perfect love can encounter reality and overcome it. Nor is it some universal idea of love, but rather the love of God in Jesus Christ, a love genuinely lived that does this." Greg, you have a love genuinely lived, and for that we are most grateful.
Thank you so very much. I'm grateful to receive the Wayne Oates Award and to be in your presence and to share in this time. Ben knows Canmer, congregation of 8, and Ben preaches there regularly, and they're just such good and wonderful people. And the seminary does have a nice connection with them. The work of the Oates Institute is very close to my heart, and my heart feels good this evening just to be in the fellowship with you and to share in this time together. Our family's here. I have encouraged Harrison to speak up when others were talking so that now he would be quiet. But that's the most I've heard him talking. I don't know when, and it's wonderful to a granddad's ears. But my family is here, and I'm grateful for this occasion and for their presence. Nell loved being a choral music teacher for years and years in Jefferson County and other places where we have been, but also loved to be the wife of a pastor and of a seminary president. And I thank her for her patience with me and for her support and care. Our son Scott and wife Leanne are here. Our oldest grandsons, Caden's 11 and Sam is 4, are not with us this evening, but have been with us recently. Scott is an Oates board member and treasurer of this organization. And then our daughter Angela and husband Kevin Hall are here, and this is our youngest, Harrison, who is 7 months old. We have another son and wife who are in this facility. Janelle is 8 months pregnant, and she is dealing with some medical issues. And so they are here in this hospital, and their son Jack we have been keeping, a 2-year-old, and they're expecting our first granddaughter, who will be named Lala, which is my mother's name. And so we're excited about this, and we're hoping that Janelle has a healthy delivery and a healthy first granddaughter. Lala's heartbeat this evening is very strong, so we're doing well. My personal thanks to our host, Baptist Health, and especially to my friend Larry Gray. You have been a wonderful encouragement and pastoral support for me. Larry's been on the board. He's come back on the board through many years, and I'm grateful for your friendship and for your support. And he knows something about pastoral care, and he was in Janelle's room earlier today, our daughter-in-law, seeing about her, and we're grateful. And I thank you, David Cassidy, for your remarks. Were my parents alive and present, my father would have enjoyed that. My mother would have believed it. But blessings on you, David, and the community of faculty and staff and administrative people at Baptist Seminary of Kentucky. You have done well in proceeding and moving forward, and I'm grateful that you are here. The gray hairs now belong to him. The task of leading the seminary is his, and you have our full support with what you're doing. I've been asked, and not by David, to see if those who are connected to Baptist Seminary of Kentucky, students, graduates, board members, other connections, if you would just stand and let us see where you are this evening. There are several of you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that Baptist Seminary of Kentucky has a presence here in Louisville, now with Simmons. And I regret that Dr. Kevin Cosby was not here this evening, and Joe Phelps, who helped to help us engage in conversations in the early days when the seminary was looking into this. And then, as was indicated, David has gotten this fully into place, and it is such a good thing. I thought we were going to be through at 8 o'clock. And there's nothing like having a clock up here beside you. But there are a few things I want to share with you. And I do thank Rick Underwood for his leadership, and for all of you who serve on the board. D'Artagnan first gave me the call about this evening, and we caught up a little bit on our friendship, and I appreciated your getting the ball rolling as we look toward this evening. I was a board member when Vicki Holland and Chris Hammond were leading the Oates Institute, and so I do share the values of this group and have appreciated what has been done through the years. When I was doing MDiv, and Molly was, I'll tell you about that, and just Molly was doing MDiv a little bit after me, I'm a little older than she. But I took Daniel Bagby, who's a former recipient of this, for the introductory course in pastoral care. Quiet, unassuming, but very well prepared and very thoughtful, and I learned the basics, and it moved really my head and my heart to think about the needs of persons and how you might go about caring. And having grown up in a minister of music's home, I had seen some of that from my father, but to hear that and to be trained was very good. And later on, I enrolled in the course of psychology of religion with Dr. Wayne Oates. Quite frankly, I was scared to death of him. He had just a big reputation. He was legendary even then in the 70s, and I don't know, I was just worried about that somehow, of being in his class and wanting to do well in this area. And he had written so much, and he knew so much, and I learned so much from that particular setting. And I'm delighted that the Oates Institute continues to promote the kind of insightful education and doing it in various kinds of ways now that is happening. And then there's the one-of-a-kind Molly Marshall. Just to have your name beside Molly's name, or your picture beside her picture, that's just outstanding. And any time that can happen. And she certainly has done a marvelous work at Central Seminary in shaping what was really a dying seminary and bringing it to life and to vibrancy. And it's been amazing. I've learned a lot from Molly through the years. I first got to know Molly when we had our first son, and we had to move off campus from Fuller Hall because you couldn't have children in Fuller Hall on Southern Seminary's campus, and we moved up Cleveland Boulevard just a little bit north of the seminary into an apartment complex. And so Nell and Todd and I were there, and then a little bit later Scott. And we were diagonally across the apartment complex from Molly and Laura Davis. Well, Nell was teaching school, and after she was ready to go back to work, after Todd was able for us to take him to daycare, Todd and I, as Todd as an infant, rode with Molly and Laura every day to Southern Seminary for Todd to go to the seminary's daycare. Well, I look back on that, I think now, wow, that was just a wonderful experience. I was beginning PhD work, she was in MDiv work, but it's just so much that she knew. She confessed to me one time that she worried about the difficulty of dealing with Hebrew. But there was not really anything that Molly had difficulty with. She just was superb in every way, and we had a lot of good conversations on those days. But I mean, who could have believed in that car there were two people who would become presidents of seminaries? Well, I think we would all agree that we could have guessed early that there was one of us who was going to be along that kind of track, and that one was Molly. And I've appreciated her friendship and her intellect and her handling of theological conundrums. She's just marvelous in what she does. Galia, she is Tov Ma'od. Galia's a good friend. Galia Rooks is on the board. She's just so very good, exceedingly good at all that she does. So it's a privilege to be in her company. But my thoughts about this evening in terms of the value of pastoral care is to put it alongside something that I think maybe David mentioned. I have been saying for years, what churches need, what churches really need would be spiritual formation alongside pastoral care. And in many ways, the curriculum at Baptist Seminary of Kentucky reflects that kind of emphasis. I learned a lot of spiritual formation from Glenn Henson, and Glenn then taught for us from the earliest beginnings of the seminary. But to put that alongside pastoral care, and of course they're obviously interrelated. They belong together. And seminaries do well to give that kind of attention and focus both to spiritual formation and to pastoral care. Things that I learned from Wayne Oates that I think are a part of how this is shaped would be these things. And I don't have time to unpack them, but these are things I learned. The profound impact of pastoral care when provided with a holistic view of a person. So you have to start with ministers where they are, but ministers start with congregations where they are in terms of the shaping of spiritual formation and then the kind of assistance and help and care that they need along the way. I learned from Dr. Oates that many occasions of pastoral care occur in non-formal encounters. In the life of the church, you're in the hallway, or maybe you're in the gym, or maybe you are at work with someone, or you're in the hospital. There are just so many settings where you're not just sitting down face-to-face counseling, but you are doing pastoral care in those kinds of ways, and I think Dr. Oates emphasized that. And then I always had problems with the phrase professional minister. It just somehow rubbed me the wrong way. But Dr. Oates got me thinking differently about that you really can put them in the same sentence. So I was running this by Wade, and he said, yes, Wayne Oates used to say, be a professional without losing the personal. I think you can do that as a minister in a church setting, in a temple setting, emphasizing the spiritual care aspect, but doing it in a manner that means you've got appropriate training and you develop skills. The Oates Institute, Rick, is, I think, very helpful in this regard. of making a difference in the lives of ministers and churches by what is presented and the kind of engagement that you can have. Yes, it is distance learning or it's online learning, and I would have sworn by my life that Baptist Seminary of Kentucky would have never taken that kind of approach. Well, I was wrong. And of course, I was on the Oates board, and I knew about some of this for a while, but David Cassidy, it's one of his babies, it's one of his specialties, and the seminary does that well. Dr. Oates encouraged us as students to know ourselves, to know our gifts, and to know our personalities and how all of this comes to play, but to keep the focus of pastoral care on the person to whom you're ministering. And that takes some doing sometimes for some of us. So in my MDiv and also in my doctoral work, even though it was Hebrew, with Dandy Don Williams, or Diamond Don, if you wanted to call him that, and Dr. J.J. Owens, and I had Dr. Frank Static. That was my doctoral committee. It was quite a group. But even in doctoral studies, my focus was toward the local church, as David said, and how do you pastor. So I think it's important to put side by side the spiritual formation and pastoral care and let them feed off of each other, to learn the dimensions of where they can relate to one another. Seminaries have a significant role in this regard in the shaping of students who are going to serve not only churches, of course, but other places. Rick Underwood and I tried out something when I was pastoring here in Louisville. But I think churches of a smaller size still need those kinds of emphases, and so Rick had an office at West Broadway Baptist Church out on 6 Mile Lane, where I was pastor, and it was an opportunity for church members, but the community to come as needed. So even though a church of 225 people who couldn't afford a full-time counseling person could be in partnership with. So there are lots of ways that the local church can tie all of this together, and I think the Oates Institute has an important part to play in that. So alongside spiritual formation, interrelated for both minister and congregants. I don't like the word parishioners, by the way. I like congregants. That's just a preference there. You can unpack that another time for me. But a deep understanding of pastoral care and how you can put these together. So imagine then that you're a seminary president and looking for faculty to start a school. And you don't have to look very far to find a Rick Landon, who was and is a pastoral counselor in Lexington and who has taught spiritual formation and contextual ministry for us ever since the very first semester. And imagine that in the second semester, you have the wonderful opportunity to invite Dr. Wade Rowett to your faculty, who, in my judgment, and I think rightly, has really carried the mantle of Dr. Wayne Oates in ways that others have not. And he has demonstrated that over and over again at Baptist Seminary of Kentucky. That's my plug for our school. If Molly can do it, I can do it as well. But I would say to Wade, as I would say to Rick, what a blessing you have been to me personally and the kind of support you have offered regularly. But to give our students the kind of training that they need, and it is a concentration. Wade is a great testimony to you and also to Rick, and I am grateful and glad for the opportunity to express that publicly in this particular setting. So what about the future of the Oates Institute? I don't know. I'd change the name. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. You know, you weren't expecting to hear that this evening. I'd change it to Oates something. I don't know. It says institution on the program, but it's institute. I don't know. Something about that just, I don't know. Well, you can think about that. You can go to say, well, you know, the speaker this evening and his craziness thought we ought to change the name. Well, it's just something to think about. Oates is primary. The other is Maybe there's some more descriptive way to talk about this. But there are challenges ahead of you, and you already know, if you're on the board, as Rick knows, what some of those challenges are for this community of learning. To reframe some things, to, in my judgment, blend more spiritual formation, interrelate that with pastoral care, to continue partnerships. And Frank, where are you? Relationships, relational, I just think that's all, you pegged it well. That's where the Oates Institute can expand and grow from this group. Susan, who knows, next time you come back, it'll just be twice this. So I want to close with this. John Lepper is a friend of mine, passed along a book to a friend of mine, Steve Haddon, who passed along a page of this book. It's a book written by Richard Hester and Kelly, I don't see the last name, it's hyphenated, Jones. Know your story and lead with it. And they talk there, the authors, I thought somebody was helping me with that name. They talk in one little section about relentless optimism. And this is what they say. Relentless optimism is a term we borrowed from narrative therapy to express our theological view that God is always busy working in our lives, even though we don't necessarily see God at work. It is so. God helping us to realize the dream for ourselves. And although we may not pay attention, nevertheless, God's persistent, compassionate presence. I think I heard that word this evening. Consistent, passionate presence is with us at work, offering an alternative narrative. I have baptized that word, or that phrase, relentless optimism, and I call it relentless hope. It seems to me that is Molly Marshall's story. It is the story of the Oates Institute. It is the story, and probably for all of us, to have the kind of relentless hope that moves toward the future, whatever that future might look like, and that the Oates Institute will continue to make a difference. It requires money. I'm not in the fundraising end of things now, but it requires money, it requires support, it requires networking, it requires all of these things, but the bottom line of this is a relentless hope. I hope that that will be the case for the Oates Institute. I thank you for this evening, and thank you for sharing the Oates Award with me. Blessings on you.
That's appropriate. Thank you, Dr. Earwood. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Congratulations. Congratulations to all of the recipients. Thank you to all of you for coming and celebrating and honoring everyone who has received the awards as well. We want to call up Rabbi Galia R. Rooks for our blessing before we leave here tonight. You could stand, please.
If you want. The most important thing about the person who does the closing benediction is to be brief. 35 years in the rabbinate, I have learned that much. But before I begin my benediction, I just want to ask everyone to close their eyes, take a deep breath, and not only thank God for our gathering here tonight, but a prayer for Janelle and little baby Lila. Oh, Lila. That they both have a complete healing and a safe delivery, and that we have one more joy and blessing from this wonderful. Greg Earwood has been a friend and a mentor for me for many years, but we won't get into that. We're going to go right now to the benediction. Our God and God of all peoples, we thank you for our many blessings, this wonderful meal to nourish our bodies, and this wonderful group of people who are dedicated to nourishing the soul. Our award winners and honorees this evening are so deserving of recognition. May they see this as but a small token of how very great is their impact on the world. Where so often we focus on the physical traumas the body faces, it is the people in this room and our peers who tend to the spiritual needs. In our commitment to healing the challenges of the heart and mind and soul, may we always feel your guiding presence, O God, supporting us. In our efforts to work as partners with you in healing the brokenness of the spirit, may we be inspired by the knowledge of the holiness of this sacred task. Eternal God, we pray, bless the work of our hands, and may the work of our hearts always be for a blessing. Bruchim atem bevoachem, uvruchim atem betzetchem, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hallelujah. Blessed are you who have come here this day. Blessed be you as you go upon your way. From this time forth and forevermore, may you praise the name of the Lord. Amen. That was the Hebrew that Greg requested.